What's up, Notjust developers? Welcome back to a new live stream. Today I have prepared something special for you. Today we're gonna build the Formula One application using React Native. That's for all the Formula One fans out there, specifically for you, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna be very valuable for people who are new to Formula One as well. So what exactly we're gonna build? We're gonna start by displaying a list of races from this season. Then we're gonna go into more details about a specific race. We're gonna display the details of the circuit, and after that the rankings for the race, qualifying, practice sessions, and so on. So on the front end, the tech stack is going to be made out of React Native using Expo, and also Expo router for the navigation library. This is a modern stack, and it's gonna be very easy for you to get started, even if you don't have experience with React Native. It's gonna be very beginner friendly, and I'm gonna help you along the way. When it comes to the data that we're gonna use a real API. I found one on the internet, the API Sports, that provides data about Formula One races. So this is a REST API. So we're not gonna connect directly from our client side from React Native to the REST API, but we're gonna add a very thin GraphQL layer on between these two, between our client and the REST API provided by that public API. And we're gonna do that using StepZen. The tech stack for the backend is going to be GraphQL and StepZen, and we're gonna connect it with a public API. This video is brought to you by StepZen, and thank you very much, StepZen, which is an IBM company, and they are helping us build GraphQL APIs really easily. You're gonna see later in this video how easy it is to spin up a GraphQL endpoint by running one single command, and GraphQL takes over and does all the magic by introspective building our schema and also running our GraphQL API. So we're gonna see more about that a bit later, but now we can get started. All right, before we get started, here are some of the things that you're gonna need. One of them is the step-by-step guide, which you can access on our website at notjust.dev/projects/f1. And if you go there, you will have a step-by-step guide here with all the links, with all the commands that you'll be able to copy paste from here to easier follow along together with me. From this page, you'll also be able to download the asset bundle, which contains some dummy data. It will also contain the presentation and other materials like fonts that we're gonna use. And yeah, that's it. You'll also need a free StepZen account, which you can create for free, following the link in the description below. But I'm gonna tell you when we have to do that once we get to the data. So, shall we get started? Shall we start initializing the project? Here it is. I hope you were able to see something. Anyway, here is the demo of the application. This is the first page where we'll be able to scroll through all the races of this season, and after that you can press on one and see the details. Here we're gonna use a tab navigation inside Expo router, which is a little bit tricky, but I'm gonna show you how we can do that and achieve this way of the screens. Anyway, let's go ahead and start by initializing our Expo project. Okay, here is my... to initialize the Expo project, we're gonna run npx create expo application. So let me open a terminal first. Remind me later. Let me zoom in a bit. I'm gonna go to projects. All right, so after navigating to the folder where you keep your projects, let's go ahead and initialize our Expo project. We're gonna do that with npx create expo up. We're gonna do @latest to take the latest version of vcli command and to use the latest version of Expo. And let's give it a name. I'm gonna give it a f1 name and then -t to select a template. Let's press enter. If this is the first time you are using this command, it will ask you if you want to install it, so just press yes. And on the next screen, with the arrows, move down one time until you reach the blank TypeScript template, and let's press here enter. This is going to be a blank project in Expo, but it will have TypeScript configured. So I think it's the best way to do it like this. And later on, we're gonna manually install and configure Expo router ourselves. So we're gonna see how we can do it in any kind of project. Now it's gonna take around 1 minute for our project to initialize. And while that is happening, I want to talk a little bit about the upcoming event that we have, the Not Just Hack. This is a hackathon that we are running every year, and this year we want to make it bigger and even bolder. So if you want to build applications, if you want to challenge yourself and see what you can build in just 3 days, you can do that at our event at Not Just Hack from 20th to 22nd November. That's going to be the main phase, and on 23rd November, we're going to have a demo day where you'll be able to present your project. The grand prize for this hackathon, for this edition, is going to be a MacBook Air M2. So the best project out there is going to win a MacBook. I think that's pretty exciting. And I can't wait to see what applications you guys will build this year. Because previous year we had at the demo day, we have around 20 projects, and a lot of them continue working on their projects a long time after the hackathon. So they publish the application, they are still maintaining it and bringing more users. I met a couple of founders at UpJS conference this year, and they started their application previous year at Not Just Hack, and they were still working on it, having users. And yeah, pretty exciting to see these success stories of projects being started during our events. Anyway, you can find more information about this by going to notjust.dev/hack. All you have to do is sign up, and we're going to follow up with more information. Next week, we're going to announce the theme. So the hackathon will have a theme. And if you are signed up, you're gonna receive this information there. So while I was doing that, our project has finished initializing. I'm gonna open it inside Visual Studio Code. You can simply open Visual Studio Code and then from File, Open Folder, navigate to the folder that you just created and open it up there. We're not going to need the terminal anymore, so I'm going to close that one. Let's open a terminal inside Visual Studio Code. You can do that at the top from Terminal, New Terminal. We're using the shortcut. And what I want to do is right away run npm start to start the development server of our application and see what do we have there. After you see the QR code and this menu, our development server is running. And the easiest way we can see this application on a device is using the Expo Go application on your physical device. You can download the Expo Go from both Play Store and App Store. Or if you have Xcode and Android Studio, you can also run them on the simulators or emulators. So I'm going to press I to run it on my iOS simulator so that you can also see it here on the right. You can use Expo Go, that's also going to work throughout this tutorial. Now what do we see here? It's going to take a bit of time to bundle the JavaScript, and after that is finished, we will see our blank application. Yes, here it is. It says open app.tsx and start working on your application. In app.tsx, this is the current entry point of our application. If we change some text here, it should automatically auto-update on the emulator on the right. So if that's the case, we are ready to continue. Yeah, before we move on, hello everyone from the live chat. How are you doing, guys? Where are you joining us from today? Live from Kenya. Hello, Matinumu. Aditya, this year the hackathon will have a theme, so you're gonna be restricted to a specific theme. But I think that's a great way to get out of a comfort zone and encourage creativity when you are restricted to one specific theme. So yeah, you can actually vote for the theme. If you go to the event page, there is a link to the voting as well. Alexandru, salute from Romania. Anyway, so now that we have our React Native application, I'm actually going to focus right now on the data, because the data that we will have available will dictate what possibilities we will have in terms of user interface, how we will be able to display this data. So let's first have a look at what data we will have available, and after that we're gonna get back to React Native and work on displaying it, on querying it inside our application. So after initializing in the guide, we see that we get into the F1 API. So for this project, we will use this API Formula 1 that I found. They offer a free tier. So if I'm gonna go to simply apisports.io, what I can do here, where is it? Yeah, they offer a lot of APIs about sports. I think they are focused on football, but they cover all of them. So one of them is this Formula 1. It redirects us back to the documentation, but I wanted to show you that, yeah, they have a free plan with that doesn't require any credit card. So yeah, you're gonna be able to use it for free. All we have to do is sign up here. I already have an account. You can sign in using Google. Should I do that right now? But I think, yeah, I don't think signing up and creating an account is something complicated, and I trust that you're gonna be able to create an account here. After that, you sign in. I have to complete the CAPTCHA. And from here, what we actually need is the API keys. So where will we find it? Somewhere under the account, my access. So the API key is here on the top. So copy it and save it in some notes for you to be able to use it later. We're gonna need it in a moment. So let me open up a new note. Oh, come on. Give me just 1 second. Come on. All right. So I have saved the API key here for the dashboard API football. I'm gonna move it out of the way. We don't need it at the moment, but we're gonna need it soon. Now back to the documentation. Where is it? Here it is. We're gonna see that how we can interact with this API. So in the introduction, there are actually two ways we can query the API. Using the Rapid API service, which is a tool to distribute public APIs, or directly from their endpoint, from their API ports. I'm not gonna go through the Rapid API because for that you need a credit card. I'm gonna use the API sports directly with the provider of this data. So everywhere in our endpoints, we're gonna use this URL that ends with api-sports.io. It also needs an API key, and yeah, that's it. Here is a little bit about the architecture. So what do we have? We have races, which we are interested in because we're going to display a list of races. The races, they are part of a competition, which is a Grand Prix. The competition is part of a season, and also there is data about circuits and also rankings with their drivers. So a lot of data, but we're mostly going to be focused on races and rankings. So if we go here under the endpoints, we can see there is an endpoint for the races. Here, we can get a list of races based on some query parameters. So information about the race can be like who was the fastest on that in that lap, how many laps did it have, the distance, the time zone, weather, status if it was completed or not. So yeah, as you can understand, it's information about a specific race. And we're gonna need this one to get data about it. We're gonna need it on our homepage here. So let's see how we can send a request and get this information. On this page, we can have a look at how we can do that from multiple environments. What we are interested in is using this curl command, which allows us to send a request directly from our terminal. And this curl is part of most of the operating systems. So yeah, as you can see, we should copy this curl command. Let's bring it somewhere. I don't know. I'm gonna just bring it here. You can bring it in some nodes. Nodes txt. And here is the request. So as we can see, the URL is using the Rapid API. And we said that we're not going to use this Rapid API. We're going to use directly their endpoint. Actually, I'm not going to bother you too much with adjusting this curl request because I already prepared it in our guide. So let's go ahead and simply take it here. Under the F1 chapter, we have a first curl request to get, no, it's the second one, to get a list of races. So let's go ahead and grab this one in our nodes. And now this one, yeah, is using the correct API sports endpoint. It's querying the endpoint races, and it has two parameters. The season should be 2023, and the type should be a race, not qualifying, practice, but specifically the Sunday race. Now, for the header, the first one will remain the same, but in the second header, we need to provide you need to provide your own API key. So I'm gonna take it back from my notes. Probably I'm gonna bring it here. So this is my API key. I'm gonna use it here in this command. And now I can copy the whole command from here and paste it in a terminal. Let's open a new terminal and paste this command here. And what we will see is a lot of data. Actually, a lot of data. If I'm gonna copy this JSON, and maybe go ahead and find some kind of JSON formatter online to see it in a different view. We see, what do we see here? Some parameters, no errors, 23 results, which means that there are 23 races in the response. And here is in the response is an array of actual races. So the first one is Bahrain, then we see what? Saudi Arabia, and so on. So that's how we can get data about races in a specific season using this get request. And we saw that how we can actually execute this get request using curl by running this command in the terminal. As I said, we're not going to use directly this endpoint inside our React Native application. And instead of that, we want to add a thin GraphQL layer on top of that. By adding a thin GraphQL layer on top of the external endpoint, so something like this, by having our own GraphQL API built with StepZen, this will allow us to later connect to other data sources, not only from the API that we are using. For example, we could connect with our database in order to add additional features specific to our application. Maybe you want to implement features like adding your favorite driver, tracking him, making some history, or even implementing some advanced features like a fantasy game where you create your own team. In that situation, you would need some data from the API Formula 1 that we will use, but some data we will need in our custom database. And by having the GraphQL API built with StepZen, we will be able to do that easily by simply connecting it with an extra data source. And StepZen makes this very, very easy. We simply run some commands and it connects and it brings the data that we need. Later, we can also create the relations between this data so that ultimately from our client side, we can easily query only the data that we need on a specific screen from the GraphQL API without having to send multiple requests to the REST API that we have there. So that's the theory behind it. In practice, what we have to do is we will get started with StepZen, and you're going to see that it's quite easy to do that. Well, let's go ahead and first create a free account on StepZen. I'm going to go to stepzen.com. You can follow the link in the description below, and you can create a free account there. On the dashboard, after you create the free account, we're going to need to get access to some of our API keys. So go to the account, and here is going to be your details about your account, like the admin key and the account name. Once you're here, we can go to our terminal and start building and creating our StepZen backend. So I'm going to open a terminal. The first thing that we have to do in the terminal is to install the StepZen CLI command globally. So let's go ahead and do npm StepZen, not StepZen, npm install. Come on, install -g to install it globally, and we're gonna install StepZen. Any idea what are the limits for the free API, and any idea how much it costs beyond that free tier? I looked and there is no pricing page. I think that I found some pricing page here. So let's see, that's a good point. So about the pricing of this API, yeah, let's have a look. At the bottom, nothing. No, it should be, how is it called? The main one. The main one is football, or yeah, football. The site is, the original one is api-football.com, and on this website they have a pricing page, and there are plans. For the free account we have 100 requests per day, and actually we might run out of requests per day if we're gonna send a lot of requests today by building the application, but maybe we're gonna simplify by using some dummy data, some JSONs while we test, not to get out of this request limit. But for 19 a month, there are more requests per day and so on. I'm not gonna focus too much on this one. And yeah, they're not sponsoring the video. I just found them. They have a quite easy to understand documentation. The other alternative that I had is F1 API, is this API provided by Guest Developer API. But the problem is that they are deprecating it. So it's deprecated and will be discontinued at the end of 2024. It's still available. I think this one is even free, but it's going to be discontinued. So that's why I decided to go with this API football to use it. Anyway, back to our terminal. What we managed to do is to install StepZen globally. Now we can run StepZen command like this. The first command that we're gonna run is StepZen login to connect our CLI with our account. For the account name, go to your dashboard and take the account name from the authentication here. For the admin key, you can take it from here, paste, and now you have successfully logged in with your account. Perfect. Our CLI is ready. Let's go ahead and create a new folder inside our application where we will store all the files and configuration for StepZen. We're gonna create it in the root directory of our Expo project and call it StepZen. Now, back in our terminal, let's simply navigate there. So I'm gonna do cd StepZen. And if I do pfd, we're gonna see that we are in our project and then inside the StepZen directory, basically here. Now, how can we convert a REST API to a GraphQL API using StepZen with one single command? Well, to do that, all we have to do is add StepZen import before this command, before the curl command that we already tested. So simply adding StepZen import, we will get what we actually need. Yeah, here below we have the request. So I'm gonna show you, we can build it together so that you know like every step that we are taking. I'm gonna move to my notes here. And this was the request that we executed and we got data about races. I can execute it one more time just for you to see that, yeah, indeed it answers with some data about the races. And now on the StepZen side, as I said, we will take the same curl command and we will simply put StepZen import at the beginning. Now, all StepZen is doing is executing the curl request to this API and then analyzing the response to understand what data it returns. And based on that, it will create all the queries and schema that we need. Instead of telling you, let me actually show you. The other headers, not headers, but other parameters that we need to send here is something related to naming conventions. And there are a couple of them. For example, I have them here, the three parameters. The first one is query name, and we're gonna specify races, query type race, and the name races. I will show you in a moment how this maps to StepZen file names or folders or types and so on. But yeah, that's basically what we have to do. Add StepZen import at the beginning, some names at the end, and then we take this command back in our terminal. Make sure that you're still in the StepZen directory, and let's execute the StepZen import command. For me, it's not gonna work, I already see, because I forgot here at the end of this line, I forgot the slash, because this is a multi-line command, and after every line we need to put this slash. So let me delete it and paste it again. Now, if I'm gonna press enter, StepZen will ask how do we want our endpoint to be called. I'm gonna go with the default one, and we see that in less than a second, StepZen already created our GraphQL schema. I'm gonna go ahead and do StepZen start to start our development server, and then I'm gonna show you some of the files that it generated. When doing StepZen start, what's happening behind the scenes is we are deploying our API to StepZen, and then this API is going to be accessible through the internet in one easy command. What we can do from here is where we see explore it with graphical, press on this URL and it will open in browser. It will open here in browser and it will already have a pre-populated query. If we execute that query, we see that the season field must be filled. Yes, we need to provide a variable here for the season. It's going to be 2023. Type is going to be a race. And if I execute now, we see in the response all the data about the races, and we can even adjust like exactly what data do we want. Here on the right, we see the builder of this query, and at the moment it only has information about the race, but maybe you also want information about the circuit like ID, image, name, or maybe the competition and the location like city, country. Maybe you also want to know the fastest lap and who was the driver. You can do that by selecting the fields here. They will appear in your query on the left, but when you execute, now the response will contain also data about the circuit, the competition, like the country where it happens, the fastest lap, the ID of a driver that had that fastest lap. So, as you can see, we already have this GraphQL API that is publicly accessible. We can already start integrating and querying the data, executing these queries inside our React Native application to get information about the F1 races in a specific season. So yes, to summarize, all we had to do is, after we had the curl command returning the data that we need, all we did is appended StepZen import and the front of that curl command and provided a query name, query type, and the name as extra parameters. Now let's see, first of all, what actually happened, what new files we have in our project. And to do that, we're going to go into the StepZen folder. Everything starts with the index.graphql, and this is the entry point that combines all the other endpoints that we have. As you can see, it only mentions the file from the folder races. In these races, we have another index.graphql, and this index.graphql is specifically related to the endpoint that we just imported. The StepZen import that we created is this races index.graphql. The name that we provided as a parameter is the name of a folder, races. The query type and query name, you see races, is going to be, if you scroll down, we get to the actual query that we execute to get the data about races. The name of the query is called races. We could also call it get races, and the return type is race. So these are the parameters that we added here to StepZen. Now, using the REST handler, it connects this query to the endpoint, to this RESTful endpoint. It also adds the necessary headers for our API, which could also be extracted to configuration files if we want. And yes, then it analyzes the result, and we will see that above here is all the types that we need automatically generated for us without us having to write any single line of code. So here is the type for the competition, for the circuit, for the fastest lap, races, and so on. So quite powerful, isn't it? Anyway, that was our first imported API endpoint. And while we're still here, let's try to import a second one. And the second one that I want to import is for the race rankings query. So there is an endpoint called rankings, and let's look at the documentation on the API ports. This is the rankings, and there are other sub endpoints, subdomains, let's say, not subdomains, yeah. Endpoints inside these rankings. What we are interested in is to know the rankings in a specific race. So this one is the rankings/race. We need to provide the query parameter called race. This is a required parameter, and back we're gonna receive the position of all the drivers on the grid in that specific race. So the same step that we had before, all we have to do is run this StepZen import command. Let's go to the nodes. I'm gonna add it here, maybe with a comment, import rankings, and this is going to be the command. We're gonna do a get request. The URL is this one with, at the end, rankings/races. It will provide the race query parameter. The API key should be replaced with our actual API key. This is important. The query name is going to be race rankings and so on. And the only additional field that we added here is the prefix rank. We're doing this in order to not have type collision between this one and the previous import command that we executed. So let's copy this import command to import our second endpoint. I can stop our StepZen server for a second and import the rankings endpoint. Successfully imported. I can go back and do StepZen start. We're gonna see that in the StepZen folder, we have a new race rankings folder with the query to get the race rankings. Now our project is running, and if we go back to the dashboard, to maybe documentation, under the query, we're gonna see that at the moment we have only one query, races, but if we refresh and press on the query, there are two of them. There are race rankings and races. So now in the builder, if I'm going to remove this one and add a new query for the race rankings, I need to provide here the ID of a race. I can go with, I don't know, 80, maybe, I don't know, any number. And then we want in the response, what? The race ID, the team, no, maybe the driver ID and name, and let's do also position. If I execute this query, we see Lewis Hamilton, first one, Valtteri Bottas, second one, Sebastian Vettel, third one, and so on. So perfect. Now we have another query that can give us data about the race rankings. I think we have a lot of data to get started on our UI, and later on maybe we can import more, or I will also show you how we can connect two separate queries using StepZen in order to be able to execute one single query and get all the data that we need. And we will need that in order to be able to query the race and get their rankings at the same time. At the moment, we cannot do that. We're going to have a race ID, and then we're going to have to execute another query to get the race rankings. But that's exactly why we are using GraphQL, in order to send only one request in order to get the data that we need, not having to send multiple requests to a REST API. Anyway, so our API is ready for us in a moment to start working on it and querying it inside our React Native application. But as I said, before we do that, let's now focus on the user interface. Let's work for a bit with some dummy data, and then once everything is ready, we will be able to connect it to our GraphQL API using Apolo client. Apolo client is a library that allows us to query and cache GraphQL data easily, and we're gonna use it in our React Native to query the GraphQL API that we just built. But yeah, as I said, the first step is going to be to work on some user interface, because at the moment our user interface is quite boring. And we're gonna start with our home screen. On the home screen, this is a list of races, and it contains information about the date, when it's happening, the round, the name of the country, and then the name of the Grand Prix. Perfect. Let's do that. What you can do is you can build a query that gets exactly this data here. For example, for the races, for the season, I'm gonna do 2023, for the type race. And in the response, I can include, for example, what did we need there? Something about date. Yes, we need date. We need the competition location, like city and country, and also the competition name, the Grand Prix name. And that's it. Maybe season. And if this is the data that we will need on the home page, date, round, name, yeah. We can execute this query, and we can copy this JSON data in a file for us to use it to build the UI. If we copy exactly this, the data structure of this response, it's going to be very easy for us to swap where we are getting the data from JSON or from our API. But it will allow us to move faster while developing the user interface. If you're lazy to create all of these queries yourself, and you want to work together with me using the same data, then I prepared for you in the asset bundle that you can download in the description below, I prepared the dummy data that I'm going to use. So here is the asset bundle for myself. In the assets, let's go ahead and in the assets, add the data here. Now inside the data, there is the races JSON, and it has the same structure as you saw previously, with the response, which is an array of races. I have here a lot of data. I basically took all the data that is available. But yeah, let's go ahead and start working on this. What do we have to do? First of all, where we're going to display this. Let's start by doing this in app.tsx, as we are still working on one single screen. And later on, we're going to see how we can add, how we can install Expo Router and create multiple screens. And at that point, we're going to move some of this code in their right place. But now for simplicity, let's start all working in app.tsx. Here, what do we have? We have a text with hello. And what we actually need is we need to import the data about races. So races response equal or import from. We're going to go to assets, data, and races. Now, because this races JSON, it has like a lot of sub-objects, I'm going to extract the array of our races from this object by accessing the races.data.races.response. So .data.races.response. And if we hover here, we will see that the type should be an array of, yes, an array of races. Now, what we can do with these races, we can use a flat list component to render a list a scrollable list of races on the screen. Just as a reminder, this is the screen that we're trying to build. I'm gonna zoom out a bit so that you can see it. Yeah, it's a list of races. So, as I said, using a flat list imported from React Native, let's go ahead and below this text, let's render the flat list. It's going to be a self-closing tag because we don't need to put anything inside it. The flat list will be managed using properties. And the two properties that are required is the data, which should be an array of things, array of data that you want to display. Our array is going to be these races. Now it also needs a function called render item. This function should specify how should one item of this array be rendered on the screen. That's why, as a parameter, we're gonna receive the information about the item that we want to render, and back we're gonna return some JSX, some text or some view. Let me return a view. I want to put it from new line like this. Oh, come on. Oh no. And inside this view, what I want to do is have a text with, I don't know, hello initially. So right away, we see a lot of hello, hello, hello on the screen. But if we take some information from the item itself, an item here being one single object from the response array, like this. So what we can do is we can take the country of a competition, right? Because that's what we're rendering there. Brazil, Mexico, yeah. So to access the item, we're gonna add the curly brackets here and access item dot. It's the competition, then location dot country. And just like that, we have a list of countries here. Perfect. I'm gonna clean up a bit. For example, I'm gonna remove the text hello from here. And in the styles container, I'm gonna remove both align items and justify content from here. And maybe even the background color, just like this. And as you can see, the first items, they are displayed behind the time and the notch and so on. That's called the unsafe area. So usually we don't want to render there something that the user should be able to read, something critical. That's why we have a component called safe area view. So if we replace this view with a safe area view imported from React Native, make sure the closing tag is also safe area view. In that case, the content of this safe area view will be displayed in the safe area, like on the screen and not behind the notch and so on. Perfect. Now, what I want to do is I want to extract this render item into a separate component. Let's do that inside this file, and a component in React and React Native is a simple function. So let's define the function as race list item. And what this function will return is exactly this JSX, the view with everything. Now, at this moment, we don't have the item here, and we're gonna take it from the properties, like this, item. Now the last step is here in the render item, we can simply render the race list item, and we will send through properties the item itself. And this way we have the same behavior, but the logic about rendering one item in this list is in a separate function. And this way is more reusable, better split into custom components, and it's going to be easier to grow this and work on this race list item. One more thing is that if you want to get type recommendations here, because at the moment the item is of type any, we can specify the type here by providing the object type should have an item, which should have the type of one race, right? So I'm gonna say type of races at position 0. Now our item has all of this information. So it's going to be easier for us to get autocomplete like this. Perfect. Let's go ahead and first maybe display all the information that we need, or all the items that we will need. And only then let's go ahead and work on the styling. Or no, let me actually set up a little bit the structure for the styling. And because, yeah, actually we already have a style sheet. So I'm gonna only add the item container just for us to have a visual representation of what are the components for one single item. And for the item container, I'm gonna simply do a padding 5 or maybe 10, a margin 5, and a background color of white. Now, let's assign this item container style to the view for our race list item by sending the styles.item container. All right, now we see it. And the background color of this one should be, how is it called? Like there is a name for the color, white smoke. Yes. So now the background is with a grayish color, and the item container is with white, and we can easily see where the box of one single item. Now that we have that, as I said, let's go ahead and render the information that we will need, and after that, think about the styling. So for the information, the first one is something about the dates. Something about the dates, right? How do we do that? I don't know. Let's start with text here. For example, a hard-coded 0305, and below it is going to be another text for the month. For example, November. Okay, then we have here round 21. That's another text. We're gonna put a lot of texts here. Round 21. We're gonna put the hard-coded texts, then we're gonna style, and then we're gonna think about how to have them dynamic. And below is the country name. We have it already, but below that is the name of the Grand Prix. So I can copy this competition location country, but this time I don't need the location. I don't even need the, I don't need the location. I need the name of a competition. And the last line should be, Bahrain Grand Prix. And as you can see, in the actual application, it also has like Formula 1 in the beginning and the season at the end. Something like Formula 1 2023. Formula 1 Bahrain Grand Prix 2023. Perfect. The last thing on this screen is the icon, right? So with icons, we can use Expo icons, which is pre-installed in our Expo project. And if we go to the icons.expo.fyi, we can search for icons. For example, I can search for like an arrow to the right. I'll go with this one from Typo. So let's first import this this font here for vector icons, and then render it this way at the end of our item container. Yes, we see the icon on the screen. Everything is perfect. All right, so we have a lot of things to style here now that we have a data. Well, first of all, for the color. What are we gonna do with a color? Let's go ahead and see what color is actually being used here and add it as a global constant. I don't have a source folder yet, but now is a good time to create it. So let's create a new folder called src for the source code. I like to keep all the source code in this directory. Then we're gonna create a new folder inside it called constants. And inside constants, we can create a file called colors.ts. From the colors, let's export const primary. And the primary color is going to be this one, ed0500. Now in our app.tsx, let's go ahead and import our colors. Import colors from source constants colors. And what we need is for our icon, for the color here, instead of this one, let's give it a variable called colors.primary. Is that correct? No. For the colors, let's export, instead of this, let's export a variable colors that is going to be an object with the key primary. Primary double dots is this one. So instead of exporting a variable primary, I exported a variable colors, and inside it, it has a primary key. Now back in app.tsx, where we import, we need to destructure the colors because that's the object. And now our arrow actually has our red color that we selected there. Perfect. Now we have a color. What else do we need? Oh, a lot. So let's start by assigning styles to all our texts and then going ahead and actually styling them. For example, this one is going to be style dot date. Let's copy it from here, and for the second one is going to be month. Then we can call it round. This is country, and the last one is, I don't know, description. Can be like this. Okay, so date, month, round, country, and description. We're gonna have to add all of them as objects here in our styles container. So date is going to be an empty object. Month is going to be an empty object. What else? Round country. And description. Well, for the country, that's already like a very large font size 20. Font weight, bold. All right, that's already better. For the round that is displaying above the name of a country, the color is going to be also red. So let's use colors.primary. That's the red. What else? The description is going to have a grayish color. Maybe dark gray. No, dark gray. Dim gray. Yeah, maybe that's better. Let's work a bit with alignments, with positioning all of these texts around our container. Because right now, all of them are displayed on top of each other. What we actually want is a free column layout for this item container, where the first column is going to be about the dates, then the actual details, and the last one is going to be the icon. So in order to, well, first of all, in order to align the items inside this item container, in order to align all the childs here, to not be in their own row, but to be in the same row, what we should do is on the parent container, which is the item container, we can add a flex direction here. One can say that it shouldn't be a column, it should be a row. And if you do that, now all of the data is displayed in the same row. That's not exactly what we wanted. We wanted to display in the same row, but at the same time group some of them together again. For example, the date and the month, they should be grouped together into one single column in our row. To do that, these are the two text boxes that we want to group together. Let's simply put them inside a view. So a view that starts here and ends after the group. And just like that, these two text boxes now will be on top of each other, because by default, the flex direction of a view is column. So by simply putting it here, inside they will become, they will be displayed in different rows with a flex direction column, but in the main container, they will behave like as a group and will be in the same line with other childs here. Well, we should do the same with the next three text boxes, which is the middle container. Let's put them into a view to group them together as well, just like this. And now, yes, they are exactly how we wanted them to be. The last one is the icon, right? Well, if we want the icon and the other items to be on the same, aligned on the same horizontal line, what we can do is that on the container that we added flex direction row, we're gonna align items on the center. And this will put the icon and the other containers on the same horizontal line. Now, what we actually want to do is we want to make sure that this and typo, this icon is displayed all the way to the right of our container. But because the middle container currently has a dynamic width, then the last column is always in different positions. What we can do is we can say that the middle container should take all the available space and only leave the necessary space for the other two containers. To do that, we're gonna attach a style here to the middle view with a flex 1. Flex 1 means take all the space available in the container. And this will actually push our icon all the way to the right. And the middle container will be the whole width of this available space. Okay, we're getting there. Slowly, but we're getting there. I think, what else? I think that top view, we will give it a style because it needs some spacings, maybe some borders. So this one will be styles dot maybe dates container. Let's copy it. And it's going to be right after the items container. So dates container is like this. In the dates container, I wanted to add maybe some padding, 10, just to add more spacing. Maybe margin right, 10. And it also has a border. So border right width, let's set it to 1, and border color is going to be gray. Or maybe a lighter version of gray, called Gainsborough. Yes, that's exactly what we wanted, like this. Now, in the dates container as well, we want to align the items in the same vertical line. Well, because they have different flex directions, we're going to use the same align items here in the dates container, but in this case, it will align it on the same vertical line. And now the month is going to be from the, not from the beginning of a row, but from the, it will be centered. Perfect. Now the display of this month, how can we achieve it? We can achieve it in two ways, by either wrapping this text inside a view and having a background color for the view with border radius and so on, or we can try to do that directly on the text component for the month, on the month style. So if I go to the month here, what I can do is I will start with background color. Also the Gainsborough, like a very light shadow of gray. Now I can also add some padding here, and it's going to be different. The padding vertical is going to be less, like 3, but padding horizontal should be more, to have more spacing on the horizontal, like 5, maybe even 10. Okay. Also, we can make this peel with round corners by having border radius 10. Nothing will change because without hiding the overflow, we basically still see what's overflowing from the container. So what we have to do is say overflow hidden, and this will hide what's overflowing and will take the shape of that we provided here with border radius. I'm not exactly sure if this overflow hidden is working properly on Android. So if it's not working, we simply go to the solution by wrapping this text inside a view and adding things like border radius, background on the view, and the rest of the styles like font color here can be gray but a darker slate. I don't know, dim. Can be like this, and font weight, for example, bold. Okay, that's good. And we can also add some margin, not margin vertical, but margin top, like 10. Maybe it's too much. 5, to have some space between the date and the month. Now it looks kind of similar. What else do we need there? Well, I think the next one, well, we can also make round borders for the whole item container. Border radius 5, or maybe even 10. I'm not sure if you can see, but it's barely visible, but it adds a very nice touch to it. And another thing that we can add to make this user interface pop is to add some shadows. Adding shadows in React Native is a bit tricky, but I always go to React Native shadow, and there is this shadow generator that you can simply adjust how much shadow do you want. I will go with depth 1 and copy all of these styles. On iOS, it only needs this elevation, but on Android, it needs shadow, color, offset, opacity, and so on. So now it will look much better. All the item containers will pop on the screen. Nice, perfect. What I'm gonna do right now is, let me go ahead and do git add, git commit. This is going to be init StepZen and also races UI. Yeah. All right, so we have good progress. I think the next step that will make this user interface really pop is going to be to use the Formula 1 font that you can see here on the user interface. Before I do that, I also want to show you how we can export this component to a separate file. We developed the race list item component in the same file with our app.tsx. The rule of thumb is to have one component per file, and this way you keep your files smaller, more reusable, and easier to manage. So what I'm gonna do is in the source directory, let's create a new folder called components. And inside here, let's create a new file called race list item.tsx. Now in the race list item.tsx, let's bring the actual race list item component from here. Gonna bring it to our file. And as you can see, a lot of things are missing here. Usually what I do is I copy all the imports, I bring them to the new file, and I will delete the ones that I don't need at the end. Also, the import of colors is a bit different. We need to go one directory up, then into the constants, then into the colors. When it comes to the styles, we are still missing them here. I do the same. I go back to app.tsx. I copy all the styles from here to our new component, and I simply delete something that I don't need. For example, I delete the container because container, this is about app.tsx. Everything below from the item container is about this race list item. Now you can, well, as you can see, it also needs these races. So I probably will also import these two there just to take the type, which is a bit, not the best. Probably later we're gonna define our types ourselves, but now we are inferring them from our JSON file. I wanted to say that now we can clean up a bit here inside our race list item to delete the imports that we don't need, and we have a very clean file. We should also not forget to export default, this function, to be able to import in our app.tsx, because now there is no race list item and our application will fail, but we can import race list item from source component race list item, and we are back to how it was before. I'll clean up a little bit the app.tsx and specifically the styles, because we moved all the component about an item, we moved it, so most of the styles here can be deleted. Actually, all of them except the container. Now we can also delete some of the things that we don't need here. I'll move the import a bit to the top, and I think that's a much cleaner app.tsx file. It only has a flat list that uses the races data and uses a custom component to render it on the screen. And we have it scrollable like this. Let me commit it. You're going to have access to the source code. At the end, I'm going to provide the source code for everything that we're doing, and you're going to find it in the description below. You can also move from commit to commit to see how the application progressed. Custom component. Nice. How is it going, guys? Let me see the questions from the live chat. In the future, please teach us how to build React Native application using TDD approach, test-driven development. Yes, if you're interested in more advanced things about building full-stack mobile applications, make sure to check out our academy at notjust.dev, where we teach React Native and building full stack mobile applications with React Native, with Expo, with AWS Amplify. We teach it very in depth, very practical. We have more than 40 hours of content and more than 650 happy users. So yeah, if you're interested in more advanced stuff, if you want to get to the next level, then definitely check out academy.notjust.dev. If you want to give it a try to see how our courses are structured and built, we also have a free masterclass that you can join. Also, we have a link in the description. Okay, back to the questions. How do I customize styling with Amazon Cognito? This is very off topic from today's tutorial, but I'm gonna answer shortly. With Amazon Cognito, you are not required to use their pre-built user interface. What you can do is build your own screens for the authentication and then simply connect it with the Auth API directly. We have a tutorial on that also for free on the channel. If you're gonna search the authentication flow, there are a couple of videos where we teach you how to build the screens, how to add form validation, and also how to connect it with Amplify. Saeed is saying, hi there, I will join when I just hacked 2023. Cannot wait to attend the event. Awesome, I'm excited for that. I see that I forgot to update the asset bundle. Let me do that really quickly right now, just for you to also have it. I forgot to update the actual downloadable file. So let me go here. Give me just 1 second, and then we continue with our user interface. The next step is going to be interesting. During the next step, we're going to load custom fonts to make our UI pop. Okay. Yeah, it was from the old project, from the AI. Live streams. F1 bundle save. Yeah, I updated the asset bundle, so now if you download it again, you're gonna see the data that you actually need. Is there a Git repo already? I haven't created it. I haven't created one, but if you're really curious to follow along with me, let's go ahead and create it together, because it will take us literally 30 seconds. Under the notjust.dev, F1 up with React Native and IBM StepZen. It's going to be public. Create. Let's connect it inside our repository, and let's do git commit, not git push, git push. Origin main. Now it should be there, and I can also update it. I will paste the link in the comments and in the description. So yeah, the GitHub is already there. By the way, but it's a very long shot. If there is anyone who feels comfortable writing some documentation, I would really appreciate some help from our community with README files for our projects. So if you wonder how you can help us, if you send us a pull request with some documentation in the README of how to run the application, maybe a link to our YouTube guide, I'd really appreciate it. I really don't have time to go there, but it's helpful for people to know how to get started. What's the project about? What tools it uses? what they will learn and so on. So should I quit? Why should you quit? Let me see the previous questions. Android Studio is tough. Is React Native easy? Yes, React Native is much easier than native Android development. I remember in like years ago at the university, I was learning like Android development, and it was a nightmare it was feeling that I always had to basically copy paste a bunch of code without understanding, like just to make the application work, just to change a color or something there. With React Native, for me personally, it was much easier, maybe because I was coming with web experience, maybe some experience with React.js, but that's not mandatory. Like, go ahead, try to follow one of these tutorials and see for yourself. Also, to get started, if you are to get started, make sure to use Expo, because with Expo you don't have to install Android Studio to build your Android application. You can right away execute and run the application using the Expo Go on your physical device. Take a break if needed. Thank you very much. We're gonna continue actually. Yeah, yeah. People feel the same. Just copy and paste. Yeah, maybe the resources. I was not using the right resources, or I don't know. But now I'm trying to explain like everything, all the lines that we write here, so that you have a much easier experience following along our tutorials. And I hope you actually enjoy. If you've got until this point, that means that probably you got something out of this tutorial. And I wanted to ask you a favor, and I'm gonna do that after finding this one here. I want to ask you a very small favor. If you enjoy the tutorials, if you learn something new today, make sure to consider subscribing to our channel. We have a goal for this year, by the end of the year, to reach 100,000 subscribers. We're currently at almost 85K, and in the last 3 months, we are 10% ahead to reach our goal. So yeah, I know it's possible because 99% of people watching the video is not subscribed. I can see this in the analytics. And if you can take 1 second to press that red button, it would mean a lot to us. And maybe we can reach it by the end of the year. Anyway, thank you very much. And back to our tutorial. So, as I was saying, the next step for us is going to be to add custom fonts in our application, because as we can see, there is a very distinct Formula 1 font. I found one, and I'm gonna give you credits where I found this one. Wait a second, forgot to add them. I'm gonna give you the source of a font that I found. Oh, I'm getting lost in all of the pages, but here it is, and I should have the f1assets.com/fonts. So this is the website, f1assets.com/fonts. You can download from here the fonts from F1. I'm not actually sure if it's the official ones or what's up with this one. Yeah, it's not affiliated with F1. So I'm not sure what's the details about this, but this is for educational purposes only. Make sure you credit them if you're gonna use this in production. You'll also find them inside the asset bundle folder that you can download from the description below. So here is the folder with the fonts with Formula 1. Probably I will delete them from here. So you can always come here to download them. But let's import them to our assets folder. Let's go ahead and import them like this. So here we have around 5 or 6 fonts for Formula 1, for regular, wide, bold, and so on. In order to load them in our application, we're going to use the Expo fonts library. With Expo fonts library, we can load fonts in our application and use them for our texts. And to install it, we're going to start by running npx expo install expo-font. Let's open the terminal, clear, and do npx expo install expo font. Now here is a small documentation on the usage of it. What we are interested in is in this hook called use fonts. So if I'm going to copy it here and add it to our application, let's add it here, and the use fonts will be imported from import use fonts from Expo fonts. How is it called? Expo font. Now we need to provide the path to our font. So if we are in app.tsx, there's going to be assets, fonts, and then the name of the font. The name of the font, let's start with Formula 1 black. So let's call it formula.ttf. And the name, we're going to call it F1 black. Now, after our font is loaded, we can use this as a font family for the texts that we want to display using this Formula 1 black font. Let's test it out by going into the race list item. And for example, for the country, where is the country? Country. For the font family, let's use F1 black. All right, we see it already here. It should work. But at the same time, it might fail. For example, if you refresh the application, you're going to see that the font is not displayed and there is an error saying that there is no font called F1 black. That's because the font has not loaded yet and we are trying to use it. So a way we can do that is we can, as long as the font are not yet loaded, we can show an activity indicator. So we can say if fonts are not yet loaded, don't render the flat list that needs the font, but simply return or render an activity indicator imported from React Native. Activity indicator is a simple spinner. And now if I'm gonna refresh, we don't see this spinner because it's very, very instant. But at the same time, the application works and the application is rendered only after the font has actually been loaded. This is a very primitive way of doing that. In the documentation of Expo font, what they are doing is they are using the splash screen to load the font. What do I mean by that? They are preventing the splash screen to automatically hide, and they wait on the splash screen as long as the application is loading and as long as the fonts are loading. Only after that, they are manually hiding the splash screen. So this is another way of doing that. But at the same time, they are still doing this return null if the fonts are not loading. So this is an extra step if you want to show the splash screen while loading the fonts. Well, we have a lot of fonts there. So instead of writing them manually, I'm gonna look at how I did that previously. So inside our layout, these are all the fonts that we will need. Well, I'll have to remove some of them here. So there is the F1 black, bold, italic, regular, and wide. Perfect. Let's go ahead in our race list item and start using this font inside our application. So as we can see here, for the name, I think black is too bold, so we can go with F1 bold. Yes, that's much better. We don't even need the font weight bold here because the font family is actually a bold font family. For the date and the month, well, let's start with a month. Font family, what should it be? F1 bold? Yep. And for the date, it should be the regular font family, F1 regular. Yes, and now the dates are also displayed properly. For round 23, that should also be F1 regular. So round, it should also be F1. And for the description, we're going to leave it by default. We're not going to change it to F1. And what else? While we're still here, the country that is being displayed here, I think needs some vertical spacing. So margin vertical 5 will do its job, I think. Yes, it added more space, maybe even more, like not 10, but 7. Yep, looks good. Looks good to me. And looks quite similar to how we intended it to be. Okay, awesome. So this was our custom fonts. And I'm going to go ahead and go git add, git commit -m, custom font. I just realized that we went to the custom font, but we are still rendering here some hard-coded data for the dates. That's why we're doing that, because to actually render these based on the date that we receive from the item, which, if I'm gonna console log item.date, or maybe not even console log, but render it on the screen, for example, after this 2023, if I'm gonna do date, maybe in a new text altogether, we're gonna see that we have a date which is a string, the date of the specific race. When we have to work with dates, we can basically parse it to a JavaScript date and manually like format it and so on. But the default JavaScript date class doesn't have a lot of ways we can format it and so on. So that's why to work with our dates, we're gonna use a library called day.js. So let's start by installing it in our application by doing npx expo install day.js. Let's go ahead and import it at the top of our race list item component. From day.js. And what we can do now is when we display this item.date, we can parse it first to day.js, and then we can do a format, for example, year dash month dash day, and this will show it with the format that we specified. If we only will leave here the this will display the month as a number. If we do 3 m's, I think it will display it with, yes, it displays it with letters. You can learn more about this in the documentation of day.js for displaying. So you can see all the formats that you can apply. But this was leading to the fact that now we see that month as a 3-letter abbreviation. That's exactly what we need in this left container. So I'm going to copy it from here, and I'm going to put it instead of a nov hard-coded text in the left container. And I'm also going to remove it from the main container. It was only for demonstration. All right, now the month in this container is dynamic for all the items. Should I do it like this so that you can see better? Or is it okay for you? The same thing is with the dates. Well, the target date here is quite easy because what we're gonna do is something similar to this one. We're gonna parse the date with day.js, and we're gonna display it by formatting it to DD, which stands for day 05, yes. But now we see that the second number is correct. The first number is not correct. Well, that's because we don't have information about when the weekend started. We only queried the races from the season, and we know that the races are usually on Sunday, and the weekend starts on Friday. So what I can do is I will take the same structure in the first date, which should display 05 to 05. But if I'm going to first subtract here 2 days, now it should be 03, 05. So this is a little trick, just because we know that the race is usually on Sunday, and this is the date of a race. We're gonna display that 2 days before the race as the beginning of a weekend, which more or less should be okay. So now our dates are not hard-coded, they are actually dynamic. What else? Round number 21. For the round, I think we're gonna simply receive it as a property here, round. Let's specify the type of round. That should be int number. And we're gonna display it as round here. It's gonna fail because if we go back to app.tsx, we see where we render the race list item, we're not yet sending the property round. If we're gonna send it as 2, then all of them will be round 2. How can we understand which round was that? First of all, I think what we should do is we should sort all the races based on their date. Because right now, if we're gonna look here, console log races dot, I'm gonna only display the dates, map. If we're gonna look here, we see that it's ascending. So it starts with month March 03, 03, 04, 04, and it ends with the latest ones, 10 and so on. So what I want to do is I want to first sort them by date in descending order. I want the latest races to be on the top. So sorted races is going to be equal to races dot sort. The dot sort method on an array expects a function that will receive 2 dates, date or race 1 and race 2. Now we need to return a negative number if race 2 should go first, or a positive number if rate 1 should go first. We can achieve that by simply transforming the date of race 1 to days.js r1.date, and then taking the difference to the day.js of r2.date. So we're calculating the difference. We need to make sure to import. Where is it? No. To import day.js at the top in app.tsx like this. And now our sorted races should be sent to our flat list. Nothing changed. I think we just simply have to revert first here to be R2 and second one to be R1. And now we see that we start with the latest race, November, October, and so on. And now we understand that actually the last race in this list should be round 1, and the first one should be the round 23, let's say. So how we can do that? We will take, there is the index property that we also receive here, which represents the order of the item in the list. So if I just use it, we're going to see 0, 1, 2, 3. I actually want the 0, 1, 2, 3 to start from the bottom. So I'm going to do sorted races.length minus index. And this way, the first one is going to be 1, 2, 3, and all the way until round 23. Perfect. Amazing. Now our races are sorted. The round is dynamic. Country is dynamic. Description is dynamic. Everything is dynamic. Maybe even the name here can be, I'm not sure if we queried in the dummy data races, if we queried the season. Yes, we actually did. So even the season can be dynamic here instead of hard coding it by using item dot season. Yes, dynamic. Awesome. So let me go ahead and do git add. And this one is dynamic fields for races in the list. I'm going to also push it so you right away have access to it. Okay. I think the main screen of our application is finished. Looks pretty cool to me. And I think we are ready to move to the next one. But actually, before moving to the next one, to the next screen in our application, we're gonna have to set up Expo Router for as our navigation library. We're gonna use Expo Router, which is a file-based navigation library, to create different screens in our application and to navigate from one to another. And that's gonna be our next step, after which we're gonna get into more details about building the rest of the screens for the details of the race. By the way, I didn't ask you guys, are you a fan of Formula 1? Are you watching Formula 1? Let's see, let's run a poll. I started watching F1 previous year while we were going through COVID. Yes, and we said like let's give it a try and watch it on Netflix. We started with a Netflix show, and if you are not familiar with Formula 1, I highly recommend to start with Netflix show, The Drive to Survive, and after that, like you're gonna fall in love with it. And this season we're already following it every single race, every weekend. We're watching Formula 1. Danilo, thank you very much. Daniel, hello. How are you doing? Are you building the app with the latest Expo file-based navigation? Revan is asking. Yes, we are building the application using Expo Router, and you are at the right time because at the moment we are getting into this. We will use Expo Router, we will set up in our project, and we will start adding multiple screens, navigating between each other and so on. What is all about this build? We're building the Formula 1 application. So far, we have a first screen that displays a list of races, and now we're gonna go ahead and start displaying the details of all the races. Let me grab a coffee, and I'm gonna be back, and we will continue with Expo Router. So we are back and we're continuing our Formula One build. As we're getting into the second part of our build, should I put some music? What do you say, guys? Let me try to add some music, not to be distracting. One, two, three. Let me know if it's not too loud. Jasper is asking, just wondering in what country do you live? I live in Spain, on Canary Islands, Tenerife. Alright guys, so let's continue. As I was saying, the next step, I think I did this transition too many times, but the next step is going to be to set up Expo router in our application, because we already have a first screen ready. We need to add more screens, and for that we need a navigation library to be able to create the screens and to navigate from one to another. For this we're gonna use, as someone mentioned here, the new Expo file-based navigation system, and which is called Expo router. Let's go to Expo router introduction, and let's go ahead and right away to the installation. In a couple of words, if you don't have experience with Expo router, this is a file-based navigation system. This is something new, like a new concept for React Native applications, but it's not a new concept for web applications, for example. And the way it works, because it's a file-based navigation system, we simply create files and folders in our project, and it automatically creates screens in our navigation stack, in our navigation tree. Then we can simply navigate there, and Expo router, the navigation in Expo router is happening very similar to how it's happening on the web, based on links. And these links are built out of the names of the files that you create. So it might sound a bit complicated initially, but it's really easy once you understand the basic concept of it, and then you start using it in your application. Another important detail to mention here is that Expo router is built on top of Expo router is built on top of React Navigation. So if you have experience with React Navigation, you're gonna see that some of the options, some of the parameters, they're the same as in React Navigation. And additionally, we can also integrate some other navigators, and that's also something that we will do later. We will integrate the material top tab navigation from React Navigation inside Expo router. So yeah, enough theory. I'm gonna explain more as we implement everything. So what we have to do is, as I said, let's go to the documentation of routing, and under installation, the quick start is using a template, but because we want to manually install it in our application, we're gonna follow the manual installation guide here. So what do we have to do? We already have an application, so we're gonna go to the second step to install dependencies. Let's copy this command, and back in our project, we're going to install the dependencies like Expo router, React Native Safe Area Context, and other dependencies of Expo router. Jasper, must be a great place. I'm from the boring Netherlands. From the boring Netherlands. Why boring? I studied actually in Netherlands. I lived there for 3 years, and then COVID happened, and then I moved back to my home country, Moldova. So yeah, Netherlands also holds a very special place in my heart. We go back there from time to time, and it's such a nostalgia from university years. Like, I don't know. Netherlands would be the second option if I decide to move from Spain. I mean, the next option. Really love it. except the weather, everything is perfect there. A little bit loud, thank you. Let's keep it like this. So we have a dependencies installed. Let's go back here. Let's go back here, and what do we have to do? To set up the entry point. So the entry point is the main field inside package.json. So I'm gonna copy this line from here back to our project in package.json. There is already the main, and let's simply replace it with the Expo router entry. Now we need to modify project configuration to add the scheme of our application in app.js. This is done in order for Expo to automatically add deep links to all the screens that we have. You can adjust it here to specify your scheme, for example, notjust.dev, and then the URLs or the deep links will look like notjust.dev, then I don't know, races 1 to 3. This would be a deep link. We're not gonna get into a lot of details, just add a scheme with something that represents your project, and we can move on. We are not developing for the web, so we do not need the React Native web. However, we could install that. And the last thing is the babel.config. We need to add the plugins line. So let's copy plugins in babel.config. We add the plugins under the presets, and if I'm not mistaken, that's everything that we need to do. Now I'm gonna stop the development server and let's start it again. I would also encourage you to start it by adding --space --clear. This will clear the cache, the metro cache. As we can see here, bundler cache is empty, rebuilding. This is just to make sure that everything is clean, fresh, and so on. Especially it's useful when you install like some bigger libraries that affect like the execution or the architecture of your application. So what's happening here? Let's run it on Expo Go. And we are greeted with a welcome screen from Expo Router. That's because as I said, Expo Router is a file-based navigation system, and the way it works is it looks at files that you have in a special folder called app, and those files become screens. Now, we don't have any directory called app. You can create one by pressing on this button, but it will create in the root. I don't like to have source code in the root. That's why I'm gonna create our app directory in the source folder. So let's call it app, and the name is very important. The name is how Expo Router looks for the screens. Now inside this app, we can basically move the app.tsx from the root directory to our app directory. Let's also update the imports and rename it to index. Index means home screen, or basically if nothing is provided, this is the index. This is the home screen of our application. Let's go at the top to see the imports. The imports will fail here, so make sure to add 2 dots in front like this, because we changed a bit the path. It's relative to this new location. Our assets is 2 directories above, and everything else probably should work the same. I'm gonna go ahead and stop our development server and start it again. I'm gonna close this application and I'm gonna press I to open it on iOS. Now, if everything is okay, we should see our application or our home screen with a list of races as the initial screen of our application. And that's exactly what's happening here. We see our list of items here. So to recap, what we did is we installed Expo Router, we configured it, and Expo Router looks in the app directory, which can be either in the source or in the root of our project. It looks there for screens. At the moment, we only have an index.tsx, which becomes, because it's indexed, it becomes the home screen, the initial screen that is being loaded. Now, things like safe area and so on will be handled by the navigation part. So here I think it's safe to move from safe area back to a view. And make sure to import the view from React Native like this. It's not gonna change a lot, but anyway, some of the things like at the bottom, like we're gonna be able to scroll. Yeah, it's better. We leave things like safe area to be handled on the navigation level. Whew. What next? I'm gonna rename this component from app to home screen, and I will rename it just to explain that before, when we had app.tsx in the root directory, that was the entry point in our application. And what do I mean by that is that all the screens that we would have added back then would basically also execute the app.js function. And respectively, it would also load the fonts and so on. Now, with this approach, index.tsx is not the entry point in our application. It's a separate screen. So if we would go to a different screen, we would not have the same fonts there. Maybe I can show you, I can show that right now by creating a new screen in our application. For example, if we create a new file in our application called, I don't know, about.tsx, and here export a function that will simply render about, just by creating this file, we already have a screen in our application. Well, we cannot navigate there yet, but if I'm gonna go to the index, which is the home screen, and above the flat list, if I'm gonna add a link, that's how we navigate from one screen to another. And the link needs an href, similar to how a link on the web needs an href, like where do we want to navigate. So what will be the href of the about screen? Well, exactly the name, like it's going to be /about. Now we will give this link a name, for example, go to about, and we're gonna see it at the top. If we press it, we are navigated to the next screen, about. That, yeah, renders the about. So what we saw just now is by simply creating files in our app directory, they become screens in our application. We can navigate there using the link component imported from Expo Router, and by sending the location, the href. The href is basically the path to that file, to that screen inside the app directory. And now it's in the about, but it can also be inside a folder called others. And if the about is inside the others folder, it will simply be, when we navigate there, we will need to specify others, then /about. So it's the same way as we navigate through folders and files. We specify what's the path to that file inside app directory. Well, it's inside others, and then it's the about file. Perfect. Well, I'm gonna move it back here. I'm not even sure that we need that others screen, because I use it only to explain these concepts of how we can create screen and navigate from one to another. But the next step is about layout. The layout is the component that either has like also user interface or the layout is the component that encapsulates or wraps around a group of screens. For example, if I'm gonna create the layout file here, we actually need this one. So let's create it together, a new file with the name _layout.tsx. The name is very important. This is a specific file for Expo router, and it defines the layout of these pages. Using this layout, we can add UI elements that are shared among different screens. Usually these UI elements that are shared among different screens, they might be tabs. So in a Tab Navigator, all the screens inside the Tab Navigator will display the Tab Navigator at the top. We're gonna see that in a moment, but let's first export default root layout. This is going to be a function, so let's do function. And by default, if we don't have any layout, what is happening is it returns the slot from Expo router. And the slot basically takes the screen or the code for the screen and renders it here. It does nothing more than that. As you can see, we lost some of the default styles there. Another thing that you can do, I don't know, with this slot or with this layout is, as I said, have UI that is shared among different components. For example, I can have here a safe area view from React Native that wraps around our slot. And remember, the slot is basically the screen that we are currently on. Well, it needs a style, flex 1. And now it has proper padding there. And if I go here, yes, I'm there. What we can also do is, I'm going here. I'm going to the place where I wanted to show you what, but in focus. As I was saying, the layout is used for user interface elements that are shared among different screens. For example, we can have here a title saying a Formula 1. And we want this title to be at the top of all the components, all the screens. Not from here, from React Native should be. So if I simply add it here above the slot, we're going to see the title there. So I can add here some styles, font size 25. And Formula 1 is there. Even if I go to the About screen, it's going to be there. Because first comes the text, after that comes the slot. So that's why we need the layout. But not only for user interface stuff, but also for other things as well. Well, what we can do in this layout and is usually specify the navigator, the way we want these screens to navigate from one to each other. One of the navigators that are automatically provided by Expo router is the Stack Navigator. This is the same as the Stack Navigator in React Navigation. And what we can do is, instead of rendering the slot, we can render the stack. And by doing this, we already have a header at the top. If I go to the About, we have a back button, and we also have like animation from going from one screen to another. We have a proper Stack Navigator. Because the Stack Navigator is actually handling the safe area, view, and the rest of the things, I'm actually going to remove everything and only leave the return stack. And just like that, this is a very common and very simple layout file where we define what kind of navigator should the screens use. In this case is a stack. Another navigator can be tabs, which is also provided by Expo Router. So what you can do is render here tabs, and now this is not going to be a stack navigator where you can go back and forth. It's going to be rather at the bottom two tabs that you can move from about to index. And just like that, you can change the navigator type as you wish in the layout. I'm gonna go back to stack here. Perfect. And as I was saying, the layout is not only about the UI that is shared, it's also about the logic or the life cycle events that should happen in our application. If, for example, let me do, I'm not sure if I should go into this many details. Hopefully that's valuable for some people, because if you already know how it works, you can skip forward a bit. But I'm gonna add here some console logs. For example, about screen. On the index, I'm gonna console log here home screen, and on the layout, I'm going to console log layout. So initially, when we render the application, the layout is the first thing that is being rendered. After that, the home screen is being rendered. Now, if we go to the about, the layout is not re-executed, but the about screen is. So what I wanted to say here is that the layout, and in this case, because it's the root layout, is right inside our application, becomes the entry point in our application, and it's always going to be executed no matter on what screen we are, in about, in index, or in even other nested screens. So this is the place where we do global things. We define global providers, we execute some stuff that should happen when the application is just being launched, and one of these logic is inside our index.tsx. It's the font loading. So instead of being loaded on the home screen, we need to load it in the layout. This is a global thing that should always happen. We should always load fonts, no matter if we're on the home screen, on the about, or something else. So I'm gonna copy this one from here to the layout. We need to import the use fonts from Expo font, activity indicator from React Native, and that should be it. Back on the home screen, we can clean up some of the things from here, like use fonts. And if I'm gonna refresh, yes, it still works, the font still works, and we can go back and forth to about and back. But now it's happening in the root layout, and no matter on what screen we land first, it's always gonna go through the root layout, we'll load the fonts, and only then we'll render them, the child screens. Okay. Let me go ahead and commit setup Expo router. Yes, Jasper, you're right. The easiest way to think about a file-based navigation system is like HTML files for a basic website and routing in there. So when you create a static website with HTML, you simply have like the index.html, maybe you have like blog, which is a folder, and there you have index and details, and the way you navigate there through slash and so on, the same way we navigate here from one screen to another. Hello Isaac, how are you doing? Wilder, you're the code machine. Thank you. All right, so let's go back. What I wanted to do, while we are still here on the Expo router, I wanted to show you how we saw how we can use default navigators that Expo router is providing. These are a stack, this is tabs, and I think that's it. The tabs, which is tabs on the bottom of a screen, and the stack, which is a stack navigator. The next step for us is going to be to add the race details screen. What I want to do is when I press on one of these race, I want to see the details about the race and the results for all the racing that weekend, for the race, qualifying, and so on. And I want them to be different tabs, but not on the bottom. I want them on the top. If we go ahead in the React Navigation, and as I was saying, Expo router is built on top of React Navigation, so it's really easy to integrate them together, because yeah, behind the scenes, Expo router is using React Navigation. And one of the navigators here is Material Top Tabs. Material Top Tabs Navigator. It looks as a user interface like this, and that's exactly what we want. We want to be able to go from one tab to another and to display them at the top. The problem is that this Material Top Tabs is not yet automatically provided by Expo router. Well, that's not a problem, because we can go ahead and install it by following the installation guide on React Native Navigation. So let's start by installing the dependencies here. We're gonna install it. We also need to install the native pager view. So let's grab this one here. And that's it. And below there is the API definition, how everything should work. Well, first of all, where are we going to create this top tab navigator? Because we will not create it in the root layout. The root layout, we will leave it like it is. What we are gonna do next is we're gonna create a new folder for our race details. So let's call it race. And in this race, we're gonna have, for example, the index.tsx. Let's generate an empty function here for the race details. And maybe another file for qualifying.tsx. And this is going to be qualifying results. Now we have these free screens. If a folder does not have a layout, it automatically becomes part of the layout of the parent. So it's gonna be part of this stack. Let's first of all have a look at how we can navigate when we press on one of these races, how we can navigate to the race details. And then we're gonna see how adding a layout affects everything. Well, when do we want to navigate to the race details? We want to do that when we press on one of these race list items. So in the components, we have race list item. We saw how we can do that by using the link. the link, we saw that in our index here at the top, link, href, and so on. The problem is that the link expects a string inside here to work without additional properties. I'm gonna delete it from here and go back to the race list item. Let's wrap our whole race list item container inside this link imported from Expo router. Like this. It should have the href. Href is the directory called /race. So if I do /race and don't have anything afterwards, it's gonna go in the directory race and will take the index.tsx. The styling is broken because the styles is actually on the child view. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pass a property to the link called as child. This will automatically fix everything because it will use this view as the main component. But it still doesn't work. Why? Because the link component expects the child component to have the onPress event listener. A view doesn't have a onPress event. But by simply replacing the view with a component called pressable, which is the same view, but it can handle press events like onPress. I'm not gonna give it myself a onPress event, but the link will send this onPress event to the pressable. And now if I'm gonna click on one of these, we are navigated to the race index. Nice. We're gonna see later how we can add dynamic path parameters here, but let's go back to seeing how we can structure the race pages together. As I was saying, when a folder doesn't have a layout, all the screens become part of a parent layout, and the parent layout is this one, which is a stack navigator. That's why here we have a back screen and so on. And the screen is right away inside this stack navigator. Now, if I'm gonna add here in the race its own layout, now this layout is going to be used around all of them. But at the same time, the root layout is being executed. So first it goes to the root layout, after that to the specific race layout, and only then it's gonna go into the screen. Now in the race layout, let's export default function, race layout. And now if you return here, for example, a stack, you can do that as well. You're gonna see that here we have one header, but if we press on one of these items, well, nothing happens. I don't know why, but we're gonna see. Well, we are redirected there, but now we have two headers. One of them is coming from the root layout, and this is at the top with the title race and a back button. But the second one is this stack navigator. And if we navigate from index to qualifying, we're gonna have a back button here. Having nested navigators like this is a very common thing, and in terms of user interface, usually we can hide the header of the ones that we don't need and leave only the header for the stack navigator that we are interested. But in this situation, we don't need a stack layout inside our race layout. We need a top tab navigator. I'm gonna move first to the tabs, which is the default one from Expo router. And we're gonna see that now, if we go to this screen, we have tabs at the bottom, index, race, and qualifying. And when we navigate, the title here changes, respectively. Nice. But we wanted the tabs not to be at the bottom, but on the top. That's why we install the material top tab navigator. And we see here in the API definition how we can create this material top tab navigator. Let's copy it from here and let's create them inside our race layout. This is our tab, which has two properties, a navigator and something else. Now, using this tab navigator and the additional function from Expo router, we can create our top tabs by doing with layout context. With layout context is imported from, come on, import with layout context from Expo router. Oh, it was imported here. And what we need to send there is a navigator. We already created it here and we can access it by using tab.navigator. By doing that, we create a navigator that is aware of a context of Expo router, and now it can be used simply like this, like we use stack and tabs and other default navigators from Expo router. We can use them there. And now we see at the top tabs, and we can swipe left to move from one to another. Whew, perfect. All right, so we are having a lot of progress right now. This is how we can create a custom top tab navigator. Let me go ahead and add it to our Git. Top tabs navigator. And yeah, we created a basic structure for our race details, but we still are missing something. We are missing a way to specify if we're pressing on this race from Qatar, we want to send some information about, hey, we want the details of a Qatar race, or if I press on Japan, I want the Japan one. At the moment, we always redirect to the /race. So there is no way to send some data there at this moment. Here is where dynamic path parameters come into play. And what they are is a path segment is basically, let's say, the name of a folder. And if we use one of these path segments as a dynamic property where we can send data, we can have dynamic links for different items on our application. We can navigate there, and from that page we can get this dynamic path parameter and based on it query the right data. What do I mean by that? Well, to have a dynamic parameter, we have to use special syntax. We need to specify the name of a file or of a folder inside square brackets. In a lot of cases that can happen on the file, but now in this situation, we know that all of these files like index, qualifying race, they are specifically about one race. So that's why I'm gonna add the dynamic path parameter on the folder level. So inside the race, I'm gonna create a new folder and I'm gonna use this syntax with square brackets. Inside the square brackets, we specify the name of the variable. So it depends on us how we want to name it. For example, I'm gonna use the ID as a way to identify the race. Now I'm gonna move all of the folders and all of the files from race to the one folder below. And now what we have is we have a folder called race. Inside it, we have a folder called ID that has the ID as a dynamic path parameter. And only then we have an index layout and so on. Now, without any changes, if we press, we see that the file is not found, because indeed it's not found. The route to that file is already different. It's not only /race, it also should have / something in the ID part. So back in our race list item, we can create it by specifying here race /123 for the ID. If I do that, and if I press, now it correctly navigates there. The first parameter is race, that's the race directory. Then 123 becomes the dynamic parameter ID, and because we don't have anything afterwards, it takes the index. Now in this index, we can see how we can get this data by using the use local search params hook, and there we can get the ID. If I will display it here as ID, you're gonna see that it indeed is the 123 that we sent from the link. Well, we don't want to send a hard-coded 123, we want a dynamic ID of the item that we are rendering. So I'm gonna switch from a normal string to a template string, and instead of a number here, I'm gonna send a variable with this syntax, item.id. And now, if I press on Abu Dhabi, we see item ID is 1781, USA 1776, Mexico 1766, and so on. So now you can see that we can send some dynamic identifier from when we navigate to a screen, and on that screen we can get this dynamic property, dynamic path parameter, and later on we are going to use it to query the data for the race with this ID. Okay, so this is the dynamic parameter. Let's do git add, git commit -m, dynamic path parameters. Nice. The last step, probably the last step that I want to show here when it comes to Expo Router, is how we can adjust and configure some of the navigation user interface. Starting with the home screen, we see that the header, we want it to be with this red color. So let's go into the root layout. And when we render this tag, the same properties that we were using in React Navigation, we can use them here. So remember, if you worked a lot with React Navigation, you'll remember the screen options. These are the options that are sent to every single screen in our stack. And the options can be stuff like title, hello, title becomes hello, but it will be hello for all the items, even here, hello. Some of the things that we can adjust here is, I don't know, header style. Can we adjust here the background color to be red? Yes, it works. So instead of red, I'm actually going to import colors from our constants.primary. Colors from constants primary. Perfect. Header style. I think there is also a title style, header title style. And the header title style, we want the color to be white. And we want the font family to be something like F1 regular or maybe bold. Yes, that looks better. And the title of the first one is racing. So we saw that we can add it like this here, racing. The problem is that the screen options are things that are applied to all the screens. So even here is racing, and when we go here is also racing. If we want to apply some options to a specific screen, we can do that. But for that, we need to do a couple of things. First of all is, at the moment, this tag is a self-closing tag. Let's make it not a self-closing tag, but an opening and closing tag. Now inside it, we can use a stack.screen component to send here some options like title, racing. And I'm gonna remove it from the screen options. Well, there is no way at this moment. I mean, how can we say that the title racing should be only on the index screen? Well, exactly like that. We need to provide the name here, and the name should match exactly the name of the route, in this case, index. So by using stack.screen name, we are targeting the index screen, and we are using the options to adjust some parameters for that screen, like title. And here the title is racing. If I'm gonna go there, it's race/ID. We can use this one not only in the layout, we can use it also on the screen itself. So we can go to the home screen and we can have the same, we can render the same stack.screen by importing stack from Expo router. And in this case, you don't need to provide the name because you are inside the screen, and Expo router will know that, hey, we want to adjust the options for this current screen. And racing 1, 2, 3, I think this one will take priority over the layout. Yep. In this case, I don't think we need it here on the index, but where this is going to be useful is to adjust the title on all of these screens here. But no, I think we can also do it from the layout. I'm gonna also copy it. No, actually, that's not true. Let's copy this tag.screen way of adjusting the title to our race layout. And here we will need to again add here more components. So I'm gonna add the brackets. I'm gonna add an empty component like this. And what I can do here is I can use stack.screen to adjust the options of the current stack screen where the race layout is rendered inside. So here I will say title, race details, race details, race details. Perfect. I can also use these options to hide the label of the back button. So there should be back header, back title, no, back title visible. Header, back title visible false will remove, yes, the name from there. And another thing is, if I go back to the root layout, I think there is that tint, header tint color. If it's going to be white, the caret is gonna become white. Yes. And it's better than having it with blue by default. Okay, so we saw how we can adjust the styles of our stack screen. How we can do the same for our top tab navigator that we have here. Well, basically the same. We go to the layout where we have a top tabs navigator, and we can use the screen options here. Not screen listener, but screen options. We can have background tab bar, what? Tab bar style. Can I have here background color red? And if I go there, yes, it actually works. So instead of red, I'm gonna take colors dot primary, and we need to import colors from constants. Now if I go there, yes, they are with red. Tab bar style, something with title. tab bar. Oh, there is the inactive tint color and active tint color. These are used for the color of our labels. So if I use white here, we're gonna see that the tabs that are inactive, they're displayed with white. This one is still black because we should also adjust that tab bar active tint color. And I think active tint color should be white, but the other one should be Gainsborough, like a, yep, maybe. Should I also do a font family? Tab bar, title. Tab bar item style. Well, there is the indicator, and the indicator is what we see below the tab. Now it's displayed with blue, but I can do tab bar indicator or bar indicator container style. I can do a background color white for it to not be blue, but no, it's not this tab bar indicator. Is it indicator or how is it called? Tab bar label, tab bar indicator style, tab bar indicator container, no, tab bar indicator without container. Okay, now the indicator at the bottom is white. We can also increase the height of it to 10. That's too much. 7, 5, that's better. And we can also adjust the tab bar label style, and this is for the text that we use there. So I can use a font family of F1 bold. Yes, that looks better. And we can move from one to another, and here we can go back. Perfect. So that's how we can adjust the styles of the navigation components. Style navigation UI. Hello Sean, hello Fulbright. How are you doing, guys? Jasper, Inamul, Hassan. Our next step is going to be to work on the details of our race and also to display the rankings. And after that, we're gonna connect it with our backend to query the data using Apolo client. In the root layout, we can also do what? There is a status bar in the index.tsx which shouldn't be here. So I'm gonna copy it to our root layout. Let's render it around here somewhere. These empty tags, they are called fragments, and we use it when we want to return multiple things from a component. Because the rule of thumb is to return only one thing, one component, that can have multiple childs. So in this situation, we need both stack and status bar. That's why we are wrapping it around the empty component. Status bar, where did it import from? No, I think it should be from Expo status bar. Expo status bar, and it shouldn't be auto, it should be yes. If we do it light, now the logo and the things on the top is going to be displayed with white. The index should probably be called in the race index. I'm gonna use here we're basically in the layout. Again, if we want to target one specific screen from these top tabs, first of all, we're gonna look at it. We see that it's a self-closing tag. So we're gonna move it to a opening and closing tag first, and inside it, we're gonna put a top tabs.screen, and we're gonna target the one with the name index. I want to change the title of it, and using options, we are gonna change the title to details, then race, qualifying, and the other screens will be there. All right, so let's go ahead and work on our next screens. The next screens will be the race details screen. On the details, I want to display more information about the circuit, the race, and so on. And then on the other tabs, I want to display the rankings. We have already these endpoints and this data in our backend. If we look at the documentation of our backend, we have race rankings. So race rankings will give us the information about the rankings of drivers in a specific race. What I want to do first is, again, we're gonna work with some JSON data that I prepared for you, and later on we will connect it with our API. So in this race.json, this is the response of querying for details of a race. We're gonna need this JSON in the details page. So let's go ahead and source up race. In the index.tsx, here we're gonna need the race response from above assets data race.json. Now the race itself is going to be a race.response, and we will go to data races and response. So .data races.response, and actually, because we are interested in only one race, it's always going to be the first one. So let's take it from position 0, and now our race is not an array of things, but it's only one specific race. And we can show that by displaying here what? The race details. Let's do race dot competition dot country or location dot country. So we see race details Bahrain. It's going to be the same for all of them because we are still using dummy data. So don't expect to see our data when we move to a different screen. Later on, we're going to use this dynamic property ID and we will query our backend for specifically that data about that race. But in order not to use a lot of credits from that public API, we're going to use the JSON, the same JSON for this details page. I think it's a good time to take a sit because we are almost 3 hours in, we still have to work, and I started going to the gym and my back and legs are hurting. So let's go ahead, take a sit. Look how small I am. Okay, this is better. Okay, perfect. Hopefully you can see me. Not sure if you need to. Okay. So, back to the coding. We have a country here. We have a details. What do we want to render? We want the name of the country, then the season. So we can do here race.season 2023. And below this text, we want to display what? The name of the circuit. So it's going to be race dot circuit dot name, and below it we can also render the image of the race circuit. To render the image, we're going to use the image component, import it from React Native, and yes, let's import it from React Native. And for the source, we're going to use the race.circuit.image. This is a publicly accessible image URL. And if we go right now, we were not going to see it because we need also to provide some styles to it. Styles.image. Well, it complains because we don't have a style sheet yet. So let's import style sheet from React Native and define the styles at the bottom. Styles equals style sheet.create, and here we're gonna have what? Maybe something for the page. Later we're gonna have something for the image, definitely. So let's start with that. If I add the width of the image to 100% to take the whole space of a screen, and for the height, if I do a hard-coded, I don't know, 300 pixels, we should see the image of a circuit. It's very low quality. Maybe through our APIs and points, it's gonna be a higher quality, but I'm not gonna focus on that right now. What I want to do is, well, first of all, if this one is too large, the image will not fit and it will try to overflow. You can adjust this behavior using the resize mode property on the image. By default, it is cover, but if we say contain, it's going to, instead of covering the whole container, it's going to make sure that the image is displayed fully inside the container. It's contained there. And now, instead of specifying the height, what you can do is you can work with aspect ratio. If you have an aspect ratio of 1, and if you provide the width, the height will be calculated to be exactly the same as the width. I can show you, we're using a background color, red. It's a square. If, however, we do 1/2, that's gonna be, the height is going to be twice as large as the width. If we do 2/1, that's gonna be like this. I will do with like a normal 16:9 16 by 9 or 9 by 16. No, 16 by 9 is perfect. And I'm going to remove a background color red. Now it looks better. Let's style a bit the text here. And in order to move faster, I think I'm gonna start writing inline styles. So I don't recommend that. Try to always separate the styles from JSX. But now I want to move faster, so I'm gonna write them right away here. For example, what I want to do is for the first for the country name and the race season, I want to increase first of all the font size. So font size is going to be 20. And I want to use a font family. Font family F1 bold. The problem is that both the Bahrain and the second text is displayed with bold. What we can do is we can display the main text with F1 regular. And we can wrap the name of a country inside another text. We can encapsulate text inside texts. That's possible in React Native. And we can only adjust some properties here for the style. For example, it's going to keep the same font size, but for the font family, it's going to use the F1 bold. Now the 2023 is using the regular, but the name of a country is using the F1 bold. Maybe we should increase the size. Yeah. Let's add some style here. And because we already added their page, I'm gonna use it. And the page needs at least some padding. Nice. Do we need anything else there? Maybe some for the image itself. Maybe we can add some margin 10, margin vertical. Yeah, like this. The official F1 application has a little bit more information there about the race itself. Not sure where to find it. We can look at that and how to display it a bit later. Let me see if I can show you as well what I'm referring to. Media. New movie recording. Give me just 1 second. Yes, here is the official F1 application. So yes, it displays the same circuit. And below we display some information about the circuit, like the length, number of laps, and so on. Maybe by the end we're gonna have time to implement this one. If not, you can try to implement it yourself. The data about, you can start by implementing the user interface, and the data for that one is also available through the API, through the sports API. If you look at the circuits, and maybe if you query it through here, no, the image is still low quality. Okay. Let's leave it like this, and then we can add at any time more information there. Let's move on to displaying the rankings of the drivers for a specific race. And to do that, we're going to use another endpoint for the race rankings. We already have it in our StepZen. If we check it here, this is the races, but we also have race rankings. I also provided you with dummy data. So if you go to the data, race rankings, here is going to be a sample response with data about all the drivers and their position on the track. So let's go ahead and implement that. Where we're gonna do that? Let's do that inside the race. It's gonna be both in race and qualifying and so on, but let's start with the race itself. So here we're going to import race ranking response from race rankings. Nice. And let's right away take the race ranking. It's going to be data dot race rankings dot response. Now this is an array of data. What do we have to do on the screen? We're going to use a flat list. So let's right away import a flat list from React Native. And for the data is going to be race rankings. And for the render item, we can start with simply rendering a text saying item dot driver dot name. And if we go now to the race itself, we should see a list of drivers: Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso, and so on. Nice. So we have access to them. We are rendering them. Now it's time to separate the ranking, the driver in the ranking list into a separate component. We're going to do that inside our components. Similar to how we have race list item, we're going to have ranking list item.tsx. And let's export default function ranking list item. It's going to receive the item and it's going to return the text from React Native. Hello. Now back in our race.tsx, where we have a flat list, let's replace this text box with the component that we just created. Ranking list item, and we're gonna send the item there item. We see hello, 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 but if we change here to item.driver.name, it's back to normal. Now TypeScript is not gonna we didn't specify the name of this item, so TypeScript doesn't know what is this driver and the name. So to fix this, we're gonna use a small hack. We're gonna import the race rankings. No, race. Well, let me import the same data as we have here in the flat list, because I just need to take the type from this one. So the item here is going to be of type of race rankings at position 0. And it's good to also separate it like type, ranking, list item props, and take it from here, separate it into a separate type, and simply reference it here. It's gonna make more sense if I so now the properties is of this type, and here we can see that it's the item. What's happening? Why race? Component. No. I imported incorrectly the data. Race rankings response. Okay, now it's better, and now it knows about the driver, it knows about the name. Okay, let's look at the user interface that we want to achieve. Well, it should be a couple of columns. The position, the maybe name or short name, and the time. So let's try to do that here in the ranking list item by putting them inside a view, and we're gonna put there the text. Make sure to import the view from React Native. And the other information that we need there is the time, right? So we're gonna take item dot time to display it after the name. Yes, the time is displayed there. And the first text actually before the name should be that item dot position. Position. Yes, 1, 2, and so on. Let's go ahead and import the style sheet and start working on our styles. So we have container, we have position, we have name, and we have time. Let's assign these styles to all of our components, starting with container. I'm gonna copy paste it to the other styles like this, and only change the name. So this one is position, this one is name, and this one is time. Okay, for the container, let's start with a background color white, and with some padding 5 and some margin 5 as well. We want to display in one component, we want to display everything into the same line. So let's do flex direction row, and now the name and so on will be displayed in the same line. If we want the middle container to take all the space, and in our case the middle container is the name, we can add it a flex 1, and this will push the time at the end. Perfect. The position, let's start by defining the font family. It can be F1. Can it be wide? Yes, I like that one. Much better than what we had before. Maybe it should also have margin. Right, 10. Or let's use this one as a fixed width to make sure that the second column always starts from the same place. So if I do maybe 50, yes, now it's better. Not sure how it is in the official application. Yes, something like this. I mean, for us, it's even better. Maybe adding some more padding inside the container. Yes. Border radius. Make the container better. And we can also add some shadow. I'm gonna add the same shadow to our container here. Yes, looks good. For the name, should we use a font family here? F1 regular? Yes, I like it. And maybe we can put the name inside a view and also maybe display some information about the team below that. So text is going to be item dot team dot name. Red Bull Racing. Nice. Now the flex one that we had on the name should already not be on the name, but on this view that makes the middle container. So if I'm gonna go styles and add here flex one, it's gonna be back to normal. On the whole container, if we want things to be on the same horizontal line, we will add the align items center. And now all of them are on the same horizontal line. Yeah, I think this one is even better. Margin, bottom. The time on the Formula One application has a very similar style to how our November P or month P looks here on this container. So I'm gonna go to the race list item and see the dates container or the month. No, the month container. Let's take the styles for this month container and let's go back to our ranking list item, and for the time use the same styles. Let's see if it actually works. Yes, it actually works. Maybe we don't need to increase the size, or maybe the font family shouldn't be that one. What else? I will decrease a bit the font size. Font size 12. Yeah, I think that looks good. Font weight bold. Maybe without it. Maybe font weight 500. Okay. You know what? The drivers also have pictures. Should we do that as well? Well, we can try. If you're interested, we can have a look at image. Let's import it first from React Native. And the source here will be URI item.driver.image. And the source, style. driver image. Let's get it somewhere here and have a, I don't know, 50 by 50 arrays. Nice, nice. I like it. Let's see, let's add a background color red just to see what's happening there. Where do we have position here? It has width 50. Maybe it should be less, 40, 45. And text align right. Center. I think this looks nice. Margin right 10. Okay, perfect. Perfect. You know what? I think I can improve it a little bit. Because if we look at the background color of a driver image, there is a lot of space on the top and the bottom. So what if we add margin vertical -10? No. That was a, no. I'm gonna accomplish it a little bit differently. On the root container, that is our padding. So if I'm gonna remove a padding, get it working. So we will just simply adjust the height of our image to 70 and make sure that the image also has a resize mode of contain. No, I don't like contain. It should be cover, but we're gonna use an aspect ratio of 1 to make it square. And now it looks better. All of them look good? Yes, all of them look perfect. Maybe the container needs the padding, but only horizontal. Horizontal 5. Yep. What if, now I'm just playing around, if this one will be the last, the image will be last? I don't like it. All right, that's good. That's good. We have a very nice ranking screen that we will be able to use when we will query the ranking details for a specific race. So let me go ahead and commit it. Race rankings UI. Good. The thing is that we also have a qualifying. For the qualifying, we're gonna have basically the same as for the race. The only thing is that the data, we will get it a bit differently. But for now, we can basically copy paste the race screen to our qualifying and only change the qualifying screen. And if I go here, both the race will have information, the qualifying, perfect, nice. And the details. So, very great progress for our Formula 1 application. What we have is a list of races from 2023 season on the home screen. Then we can go ahead and press on one of them to see the details of that race. We can also see the rankings for the race itself, for the qualifying. Maybe later we can also add for the practice 1, practice 2, and so on. But so far, that's great. The only thing is that at the moment, everything is working with data that we get from our dummy data, from the JSON files. Our API is already completed and is waiting for us to integrate and query it. It's a GraphQL API that we have built using StepZen at the beginning of this tutorial. And our next step is going to be to integrate our React Native application to get the data by querying our GraphQL API. For that, there are a lot of client libraries that handle this, but one of the most popular one is the Apolo client. An Apolo client is a library that allows us to query GraphQL APIs in React and also in our, it supports our frameworks as well. Besides being able to query, it also does a lot of stuff behind the scenes, such as caching all the data locally and having like mutations and so on. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna integrate Apolo client in our application to query our StepZen API. Some information about that we can find here in our guide. So under the setup Apolo client. So all we have to do is to install Apolo client and GraphQL using npx expo install in our application. Let's start that here. npx expo install Apolo client and GraphQL. And then we're gonna need to create the Apolo client and wrap it around our components. So the way we're gonna do that is using a context provider. We're gonna use a context provider. In fact, we actually don't even need, it's not a context provider, it's just a provider. So let's go ahead in the source, create a folder called providers. And inside the providers, we're gonna create the Apolo provider.tsx. Apolo client provider. Let's rename it just to have the same name as in the guide. Apolo client provider. The code for setting up our client provider, we can find it here. So let's import it and I'm going to explain what is happening here. To create a client, we are initializing the Apolo client class and we need to provide here some information. The first one is the URI of our GraphQL endpoint. To see the URI of our personal GraphQL endpoint, we can go to the StepZen dashboard. So go to the StepZen dashboard. I need to find it. Here is the StepZen dashboard, and the GraphQL API should be at the top. But let me see. Endpoints. Angry poodle. Yes, I have multiple endpoints here. One of them is called Angry Poodle, and this is exactly the one that I just generated. If you want to see the name of your endpoint, you can go to StepZen directory, and here in the StepZen config, you're gonna see, actually, it's a different one. It's Loopy Fox. So let's go ahead. I was using a different one all this time, but it should be the same. So the one that we are interested in is the name Loopy Fox. So back to our code. In the providers, Apolo client provider, the endpoint name, this is where Loopy Fox is going. API/LoopyFox, and here should be the account name. The account name, you can see here in the authentication account. This is the account name. Account name. And here we are attaching some headers that Apolo will always use for all the requests that we send. One of these headers is the authorization of our StepZen API. At the moment, we are using an API key authorization. So what we need to do is we need to take this admin key and paste it here instead of our API key. You can also, of course, do this in a better way using environment variables, and you can do that in Expo by creating a new .env file, and here a normal env file that exports some variables. The one that we need to access from the client side, we're gonna prefix with expo public, and then the name will be StepZen API key equal, and it's going to be here. I'm going to paste the key and the API key is going to be equal to process.env and the name of this key. Make sure to console log the API key to make sure that we are accessing it correctly, because if it doesn't work, we're gonna see if it's a problem of how we access it from the process environment. But the problem is that I took the admin key when in fact I was supposed to take the API key. The admin key is something that you should never share with anyone. The API key is something that you can safely use in the client-side code. So I'm gonna have to replace it here, and I recommend you replace it as well. So the API key, not the admin key. So here, instead of hard coding this value in the client, I'm going to use a template string, and I'm gonna reference the API key variable. Now that's it with the headers. Another thing that we are specifying for the Apolo client is the cache. What kind of cache to use to cache the data, the request that we are creating. We're gonna use an in-memory cache to store the information in the memory of the phone. And what we are doing is using an Apolo provider component. We are setting the client that we just initialize. And using the custom Apolo client provider component, we can wrap around our screens and they will have access to the Apolo client. In this file, our work is done. We need to wrap this Apolo client provider around all the screens basically in our application. To do that, if you remember, that should happen in the root layout. So let's open the root layout and let's import here the Apolo client provider. And we need to wrap around the screens. So here we have a stack. I think it's going to be good if we use the first component. We will use the Apolo client provider. Now the stack screen becomes the children property of Apolo client provider. And what we are doing here is we are rendering the children inside the provider itself. So that means that all the screens in our application, they will have access to the Apolo client. We can test that. First of all, if I'm gonna refresh, I want to see if the API key is correct. Yes, it's correct. So I can safely remove the console log at the top. I wanted just to make sure that we access it correctly. Now that we have configured Apolo client, we can send our first request. Where is going to happen? Where do we need the first request? Let's start with the home screen. The home screen is in our app index.tsx. That's where we have a home screen. To send a request, we need two things. We need a GraphQL query and we need the use query hook. Both of them, use query and GraphQL, will be imported from Apolo client. At the top here, we will define the query that we want to run using the GraphQL and then backticks from the template string. Here we're gonna put the GraphQL query itself. Where do we take it from? Well, we already played with them in our dashboard here. I should make sure to select, how's it called? StepZen Loopy Fox. So this is the query that we can build here in the dashboard on StepZen. We can select exactly the data that we need and where? In the builder. And test if it works and then copy it in our application. So let's go ahead. For example, here we need the races from season 2023 that can also be, I'm gonna leave it like this. Yeah, let's just copy this query because later we're gonna adjust it with data that we need. I just want to see something on the screen. Maybe even I'm gonna remove a competition and only have ID, date, and season. Just like that. So if I copy this query to our screen, I'm gonna paste it right away inside GraphQL here. And using the use query hook, we can execute it when the home screen component mounts. What we have to do is call the use query hook and pass there the query that we defined at the top. Now the use query will give us back a couple of things. Data, it will give us loading, and it will give us error. Well, based on them, we can display different things on the user interface. For example, if it's loading, I can simply return activity indicator from React Native. If there is an error, I can return I don't know, a custom text box with error fetching races, and maybe also the error dot message. And if it's not loading it, and if it's not an error, then there is some data. So let's look at the data that we get here. Make sure to import text component from React Native as well. And let's open up the terminal. All right, we already see something in the terminal where our React Native is running. So we see races with the data has the races have response, and all of them are objects. Well, you can go ahead and stringify using JSON just to see what's inside. JSON.stringify. And if we look right now, this is exactly the data that we are querying based on the query here at the top. And what we should do now is, in the flat list, we need sorted races. I will take the sorted races and I will put it here after the console log. The sorted races shouldn't use the dummy data races. It should actually use something from the data. Or I will take the races inside data dot. Let's see what data has. Data.races.response. .races.response. Now I will comment out the import of the dummy data at the top. These are the two lines here. And what's happening? Cannot assign something we've sorted. R2 date. Do they have dates? They have dates. If I do console log, not of the whole response, but of the races, what's going to happen? Cannot assign. Oh, because sorted races. What do you mean cannot assign? I'm not reassigning anything, you know? What if I just simply display races here? Cannot read property location of undefined. Yeah, that's fine. But what's wrong with with sorting them? Yeah, I think that the races from here, they are read only. So what we can do is we can put them into a new array like this by destructuring it into a new array. And now the error with read only disappeared. And now the error that we see here is from the lack of the exact data that we need. So on this screen, besides the ID, date, and season, what else do we need? We can look at the race list item here to see what information do we need. Things like item, competition, location, country. So let's go back to our StepZen, and using the builder, we can look at the response, competition, location, country. Let's see what else do we need there. Item, competition, name. Item, competition, name. What else? Item.season. That one we already have. Season. I'll put this one at the top. What else do we need? I think so far here, that's the only thing that we need. And if that's the only thing that we need, we don't need to query more data than necessary. We can test it, we see here, and we can move it back to our home screen to replace the query at the top. We see loading, and this is already live data that we fetch from our GraphQL endpoint built using StepZen, and that one is taking data from the REST API that is provided by the API sports here. So this is all real data queried from the server. That's perfect. That's exactly what we need. And this was our index.tsx. I'll also show you here how we can send dynamic variables to our properties. To do that, I can show you first of all here in the dashboard. I like usually when you do some changes to the GraphQL, try them first in the dashboard, make sure that it works, and only then copy that in your application. Now what I want to do is, instead of hard coding the season here 2023, I want to be able to pass it as a variable. To do that, first of all, we need to define variables on the my query here. The variable will start with the $sign, and we can use the same name, season. Then we need to specify the type. It's a string. Now we can use this variable with $sign instead of hard-coded string here. Now in the variables, we can adjust, for example, not to query 2023, but 2022. And if you do that, you see different, even the date is different. So now, if I'm gonna copy this query, maybe I should do the same with the type, because here we can also use qualifying and other types, not only race. So let's add a type field of that is a string, and here do type. And if I do here type race, test it, should also work. And now we can copy it and go back to our application and replace our existing query with a new one. It's not gonna work because we need to provide some variables. To provide variables in the use query, we can send here the second options with the variables. And the variables that we need is, as you see here, is an object with season and type. I can actually copy it from here and paste them in our application. So for the variables, we're looking for the season 2022 and type race. And the difference, we will see that what? Not sure what's the difference. Well, yes, after Mexico, there is, in 2023, there is another USA, the race from Las Vegas. So if I will change here to season 2023, this is the race from Las Vegas. So yeah, that means that our variables are being sent correctly to our GraphQL API, and then later on appended to the request that is being sent to that endpoint. Okay, what else? On the next screen, we need to query the details of a what? Of a circuit or of a race. Let's go ahead with details of a race, because if we look into the documentation I'm going to it's good. It's good. In the builder, yeah, let's look at the documentation for races. And this is exactly like what we integrated with. The thing is that when querying races, we can also use the ID property of a race, and in that case we are getting information only about one race. This will be very useful for us on the details page, where we want to query the details of a race based on its ID. At the moment, however, if we look into the StepZen races index GraphQL here, we see that we have only two path properties here, only two parameters here. It's not very hard to add a new one. If we add here ID of type int, because it's not a string, it's an integer, the value that we will send to the ID will automatically be appended at the end here, like ID equal to something. That's exactly what we want. And we can look at the terminal where our StepZen is working, and we see that in 2.6 seconds, our app was redeployed. So if I'm gonna go back to our dashboard in StepZen and refresh, we should see that when querying races, we also have this ID that we can specify. And in this case, I'm not gonna send season and type here. For example, in the variables, we also don't need it. I'm only gonna have an ID variable of type integer that we will send here. ID. So the ID can be what? 100. And this is the race, Bahrain Grand Prix in the 2012. Okay, that's the query that we will use to get details about one race. But what information do we need there on this page? Well, we actually don't need a lot. At the moment, we don't need a lot because we, in the application index, race index, we only need the race competition location country. Competition location country. We need the season and the circuit image. Maybe the circuit ID and image. As you can see, we can right away write it here, and it will synchronize in the builder with the checkboxes that we add here. Maybe the name as well. Okay, we'll see, like if we need more data, we can easily add, but let's go ahead and copy this query, and let's go to our race details screen. In application, race ID, and then index.tsx. Here, the first thing is to import use query and GraphQL from Apolo client. Let's define the query at the top using GraphQL like this. Now inside the component, we can take the data loading and error using the use query hook and passing here the query that we send. Our query has the ID parameter, and let's use it in the variables here. Variables should have ID, and the ID, as you can see, is going to be the ID that we take from the route parameters. Now, if I go to Abu Dhabi, and here, if I will use this data, first of all, if it's loading, I want to return activity indicator, and otherwise, I want the race to be data dot races dot response at position 0. And we can also check if race is not defined. That means that we didn't find such a race, so we can return a text saying race not found. Now the dummy data with race and the race response is not needed anymore. And we can click here. All right, we see that data is automatically displayed here. So we see Abu Dhabi with the circuit. If we look at the Las Vegas, this should be it. It doesn't, oh, it has actually the circuit. Brazil, nice, Mexico. And if I go to, as you can see, when I go to a new page, it has the loading indicator because it is fetching the data. But when I go back to one that I already visited, it automatically displays it there because Apolo, as I said, is using behind the scenes a cache mechanism, and it caches all the queries that we send. So the next time we need them, they are easily and on the device storage. Oh, nice. Last step is for the race results. Race results. That's gonna be in our race here. So how are we gonna get it? Well, in the race rankings here, we can also get the ID the same way as we get the ID from the path parameter using the use local search params in the index. We can get the same ID in the race as well because it's part of a parent path. So we can take it here, import, and let's see the query that we will need to execute for our rankings. So if I open race rankings, we need the race ID here, right? The ID, is it of type string? Let me check the API. If I go to rankings, race rankings, it's an integer. I don't know why it says. So it's an int. ID. So what do we need back? We need in the response. Well, we need the position, driver image, driver name, team, and time. So position, team name and ID. When there is an ID, always query it. Then in the race, not gonna do that, but for example, driver, we need image, name, ID. What else? Time. The time of the driver. I think that's everything that we need. ID of type int using position expecting string. Race rankings. Why is it expecting a string? It's a very weird. Race rankings index. Why is it string? What if I will use a string? Oh no, yeah, look, here it uses as a string. So I think we can use it as a string, and it can actually be required as well. So if I do a string 100, will it work? Send. Yes, I think it actually works. Red Bull Racing, McLaren, Red Bull, and so on. Nice. So let's copy this query in our source application race. Here we need, what do we need? We need to import use query and GraphQL from Apolo client. We need to define the query itself and equal to GraphQL, and here in the template string we're gonna put the race rankings query, and we're gonna use it inside our component to get data, loading, and maybe something else like error. Let's use the hook use query, send there the query, and in the options we're gonna need to send a variable with the ID, and the ID we're gonna take it from here. Now if loading, then we're gonna return an activity indicator. Otherwise we're gonna take the, how did we call, race rankings equal data dot what? Data dot race rankings, the name of a query, dot response. Yes, dot response. We should also safely access it in fact. Tags from React Native. And if I go here to Abu Dhabi 2023 race, something went wrong because this one is upcoming. If I'm gonna go to Brazil race, again something went wrong. But why? Maybe we can console log data. It's always a good. Go back to the React Native. What? What's happening? Competition season date. Console log data. Well, first of all, I want to remove dummy data just to make sure that it doesn't affect us. I'm console logging here data, but I get something that it's undefined. If I go to the race, it's undefined. Why is that? Let's see the ID. Console log ID. ID undefined. Why is the ID undefined here? use maybe global in this case. Yeah, in this case, it wasn't local because it's a sub-screen. So with global, let's see if it works. Race rankings response. The ID is 1781. Yeah, it's not, it didn't happen yet, but if I will check Mexico, for example, race, yes, it works. And now this data, as you can imagine, this is coming from actual backend. So for for the ones that are upcoming, maybe you don't want to display these tabs, or maybe you want to display something else there. But the ones that already happened in the past, it displays the information about the race. Okay. And you can do the same for the qualifying as well. So I remember which one was the only one that Max Verstappen didn't win. It was somewhere at the beginning. Don't remember exactly. Australia, no, it's Max. Yes, Sergio Perez won in Azerbaijan. Oh, so that was quite a journey. Now we have our Apolo integrated. So what I can do is I can do git add Apolo client. And look, we are quite good on time because we are almost at 4 hours long. That was the project that I wanted to showcase to you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, comment down below what other projects we need to build. And I want to say big thank you to StepZen for making this project possible. Thank you for sponsoring and for believing in our content. With StepZen, you saw how easy it is to build GraphQL APIs. Before we leave, I also want to remind you that we have the hackathon, Not Just Hack, upcoming. It's going to be on 20 to 22nd November, and the big prize is a MacBook Air M2. So excited to see you there. Let's go ahead, let's gather together and build exciting mobile applications during the event. Guys, let's stay connected on Discord. I really want to end this before we hit the 4-hour marks. So thank you for being here. Have a nice weekend ahead or the rest of the day. And I will see you